Hi Reddit, I'm 26F, and I guess this story's been building for a long time. I didn't really plan to post it here, but after everything that happened, and is still happening, I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone out there will relate. Or maybe someone needs to read this to realize they're not crazy for walking away from a toxic family, even if it's your own father. For context, I grew up in a small town with my dad, Edgar, and my older brother, Nolan, 28M. My mom passed away when I was 6, so it was just the three of us. You'd think that would have brought us closer, but instead, it turned our house into a strange kind of battlefield. Dad decided pretty early on that Nolan was the man of the house and basically treated him like his second in command. I, on the other hand, was more of a background character in my own home. Quiet, studious, helpful, but never quite enough for either of them. Edgar was the kind of dad who saw emotions as weakness and intelligence as arrogance, especially if it came from someone he didn't respect. And he definitely didn't respect me. Anytime I spoke up, questioned something, or even made a suggestion, he'd shut it down with one of his go-to lines. You think you're better than me? Books don't teach you common sense. Nolan knows how the world works. You're just a girl with her head in the clouds. It used to crush me, but eventually, I learned to stop trying to win his approval. I focused on school, got good grades, worked part-time jobs, and slowly built up enough savings to give myself options. Meanwhile, Nolan coasted through life, barely finishing high school and working at Dad's auto shop whenever he felt like it. But he was treated like royalty for showing up once a week and changing tires. The double standard was exhausting. Fast forward to about 6 months ago, I had just graduated with a degree in accounting, started working at a decent firm in the next town over, and was still living at home to save up. My plan was to move out by the end of the year, maybe earlier if I found the right place. I was contributing to groceries, doing most of the housework, paying for my own car, phone, and health insurance. But Edgar still treated me like a freeloading teenager. Then came the breaking point. It was a random Tuesday evening. I had just gotten home from work, still in my office clothes, heating up leftovers in the kitchen. Edgar came in and immediately launched into one of his usual rants about the electric bill being too high. He started yelling about lights being left on and someone using the washing machine during peak hours. I calmly reminded him that I always did my laundry on weekends and that I'd even switched to cold water cycles to save energy. He didn't want to hear it. Don't get smart with me, he snapped. You're not the one paying the bills around here. That's when I made a mistake. I said, actually, I am paying for a lot of things. I've been helping with groceries every month, and I offered to take over the internet bill, but you said no. The room went quiet for a moment, and then he exploded. He slammed his hand on the kitchen table so hard that my fork jumped. Oh, really? You think you're some big shot now, huh? Just because you work in an office? If you're so smart and independent, then pay your own bills. Go on, why don't you move out? I think he expected me to cry or apologize or back down like I always used to. But something clicked in me that night. Maybe it was the months of disrespect. Maybe it was how Nolan sat on the couch in the other room. Smirking like this was all hilarious. Maybe I just realized I didn't have to take it anymore. So I said, all right, I will. He froze. What did you say? I said I'll move out. Tonight. You could have heard a pin drop. I left my dinner half-eaten on the counter, walked upstairs, and started packing. I didn't take everything, just essentials. Clothes, documents, laptop, chargers. I texted a friend who had offered me her guest room more than once, and by 10 p.m., I was gone. No yelling. No goodbye. Just gone. Nolan didn't even get off the couch. The next few days were a blur. I felt everything. Relief, guilt, fear, anger. My friend was incredible. She helped me get settled, and I kept showing up to work like nothing happened. I didn't tell many people. I didn't want to make it dramatic. I figured Edgar would cool off eventually. Maybe even realize he pushed too far. But of course, that's not what happened. A week later, I got a text from Nolan. Dad wants to know when you're bringing the router back. No, how are you? No, congrats on standing up for yourself. Just a passive-aggressive dig about the internet bill, which, by the way, I had been paying for the last 4 months under my name. So I replied, tell him to call me. That same evening, Edgar did call. I let it go to voicemail. Then came another text, this time from him directly. Power's out. Did you forget to pay? And that's when I realized something. He had no idea what was actually in my name. All the utilities, electric, internet, trash pickup, had been quietly switched to my account last fall when I updated our plan to a bundle and offered to cover it. He just assumed they were under his control because he'd never bothered to check. I stood there in the hallway of my friend's apartment, phone in hand, reading his message over and over. Power's out. Did you forget to pay? No apology. No, hey, can we talk? Just confusion and entitlement, as if I still owed him something after the way he treated me. I stared at that message. Power's out. Did you forget to pay? For what felt like 10 full minutes. Not because I didn't know what to say. I knew exactly what I wanted to say, but I needed to choose my words carefully. I didn't want this to turn into another endless argument where he twisted everything around and made me feel guilty for something I didn't do. Because that was his gift. Edgar didn't need facts. He didn't need logic. All he ever needed was volume, sarcasm, and that cutting tone that made you feel like a child again. It didn't matter if he was wrong. He'd keep talking over you until you either gave up or apologized for something that wasn't your fault. But this time, I had something he didn't. Control. I called the electric company the same night I moved out, just to be sure everything was updated. They confirmed the account was in my name and had been for months. I even paid the final bill in advance, gave them the forwarding address for the paperwork, and requested cancellation by the end of that billing cycle. The cycle ended the day before his power went out. He didn't even realize it until the lights were already off. And now he was messaging me like it was my job to fix it. I finally replied, keeping it short. I canceled all accounts in my name when I moved out. You'll need to open new ones yourself. He didn't respond immediately, but about 15 minutes later, the phone rang again. I didn't pick up. Then another message. You can't just shut off power to someone's house. A few minutes later. This is illegal. I'm not playing games with you. Then Nolan joined in. Dad says you better call him. He's not messing around. This part might sound strange, but I actually laughed. Not because any of it was funny. More like the kind of dry laugh you let out when you realize just how ridiculous someone really is. He had no idea how things worked. He had no clue that I'd quietly taken over most of the household bills out of necessity. Not for gratitude. He never said thank you, but because it was easier to handle things myself than to watch him forget due dates or argue with customer service over late fees. The truth is, I started shifting things into my name over a year ago. It began when the internet got shut off for 3 days because he forgot to pay the bill. I needed it for school, so I called the provider and explained the situation. They let me open a new account, and I paid out of pocket. Then came the electricity bill that showed up with a disconnect notice. Again, I stepped in. He never asked how things magically started running smoothly again. He just took it for granted. It didn't matter to him. As long as the lights were on, the fridge was cold, and the internet worked, he assumed the world was turning the way it always had, with him at the center. So when I left and took those things with me, it wasn't out of spite. It was just me taking back what was mine. But he didn't see it that way. 2 days passed. Silence. Then, on a Thursday evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I normally don't answer those, but I picked up. It was Edgar. His voice was tight, calm in that forced way he always used when he was trying to sound reasonable, which usually meant he was about 2 seconds from snapping. You shut off the power, he said. Not a question. A statement. No, I said, keeping my voice steady. I canceled the account I was paying for. You're free to open a new one in your name. You think this is funny? He said. Your brother's here. The fridge is ruined. Food's gone bad. I've had to shower at the gas station 2 towns over. I stayed quiet for a moment before saying, You told me to pay my own bills. So I am. There was a long pause on the other end. Then came the old familiar tone, lower, sharper. This is petty. You're punishing your own family. No, I said. I'm removing myself from a situation where I was being used. You lived here rent-free for years. I paid for groceries, internet, electricity, and half the maintenance. I cleaned, cooked, and managed everything while Nolan played video games, and you yelled at me for leaving the porch light on. He didn't like that. He tried to pivot, like he always did. You don't know what it's like to run a household. That house has been mine since before you were born. I never said it wasn't yours, I replied. But I stopped being your free property manager a month ago. That was the last straw. He raised his voice, not quite yelling, but right on the edge. Don't come crying to me when the real world eats you alive. You'll be begging to come back. Just wait. And then he hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the screen. I wasn't even angry. I just felt tired. It wasn't the first time he'd said something like that. He lived for those smug predictions. If I ever slipped up, even a little, he'd pounce with an "I told you so." But what he didn't know, what he refused to see, was that I was already thriving. I was paying my own rent. I had health insurance, a job, a savings account, a support system, peace. I'd never been so emotionally steady in my life. But things didn't stop there. The next week, I started getting mail forwarded from my old address. Some of it was junk, but one letter stood out. It was from the city's waste management service. Inside was a final notice. Apparently, that bill hadn't been paid either. That one wasn't under my name. So I called the number on the letter and explained the situation. They confirmed that it was in Edgar's name, but that no payments had been made for months, which confused me because I had been paying the trash bill too until I moved out. I logged into my old online portal and saw that the payments I'd made covered the account under my email, but Edgar must have created a separate one in his name, then ignored it, thinking I was still handling everything. It was like finding a dozen small fires he'd started because he assumed someone else would come along with a hose. By this point, he'd called and texted several more times. Some messages were cold and demanding. Others had a strangely pitiful tone, asking if I was really going to let this happen to my family. Family. That word hit differently now. Family wasn't supposed to treat you like a spare part. Family wasn't supposed to mock your accomplishments while expecting you to clean up their mess. Family wasn't supposed to leave you out of holiday meals because Nolan doesn't want drama. But that's exactly what Edgar had done for years. And now, for the first time, he was dealing with the consequences of having no one left to pick up after him. That brings me to the latest twist, which, if you've stuck with me this far, you might find interesting. Because a few nights ago, I got a call from my aunt, Edgar's sister, Marion. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She never really got involved in family stuff, mostly stayed on the sidelines. But this time, she sounded agitated. "Amina," she said, "I need to ask you something. Did you really cut off the power to the house?" I sighed. "No. I canceled an account I was paying for. That's not the same." There was a pause. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. "He told everyone you were trying to sabotage him. Said you're going around town bad-mouthing the family." I blinked. "What?" "He said you're holding a grudge and that you want revenge. He's telling people you're unstable." And just like that, I realized this wasn't just about electricity or internet or trash pickup anymore. He was rewriting the story, turning himself into the victim. After that call with Aunt Marion, I sat in silence for a long time. It wasn't just the shock of hearing what Edgar was saying about me. It was the way my stomach twisted at how familiar it felt. He'd been doing this for years, twisting reality, telling people only enough of the story to make me look irrational, selfish, ungrateful. It was always the same playbook, but this time was different. This time, I had distance. I had proof. I had clarity. And most of all, I had nothing left to lose. I thought back to when I was younger, maybe 13 or 14. Edgar once told our neighbor that I refused to help out around the house and only cared about her books. Meanwhile, I just finished cleaning out the garage by myself because Nolan was too busy watching a football game. He lied effortlessly, like breathing. And the neighbor? She just smiled at me sadly like I was a disappointment Edgar had to endure. He did that my whole life. And now he was doing it again. Except this time, he'd lost his puppet. I didn't respond to Marion right away. I thanked her for telling me, then spent the next few hours quietly gathering everything I'd need, not for a confrontation, but for something cleaner, colder. The first thing I did was dig up old email threads, screenshots, bank statements, and digital receipts showing every bill I'd paid: utilities, groceries, repairs, subscriptions. I even had the records from the internet provider and electric company showing my name on the accounts and the dates they were opened and closed. I saved everything into a neat little folder. Next, I checked the local community Facebook group Edgar and Marion were both in. Sure enough, Edgar had posted just a day earlier. "If anyone knows a good electrician or someone who can help get power back on, let me know. House has been without for days. My daughter decided to cancel everything behind our backs. No warning. I don't want sympathy, just help. It's sad what family will do to you." The comments were exactly what you'd expect. People offering names, expressing sympathy, saying things like, "Kids these days," or "You did your best, Ed." He even posted a picture of our house's darkened porch with the caption, "Where family once lived. Now just shadows." I sat there blinking at the screen. Not angry, just amazed. He'd always known how to spin things, but watching him paint himself as the tragic father abandoned by his cruel, vengeful daughter made it clear Edgar wasn't just trying to cover his tracks. He was laying the groundwork for a bigger story, one where he could play the victim to the community, maybe even to Marion, and, of course, guilt me into returning. I wasn't going to let that happen. So I responded in the one place I knew people would pay attention to, the comments section. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I simply posted this. "Hi everyone. I don't normally share private family matters, but since my name was mentioned, the electric, internet, and other utilities were under my name and paid for by me for the past year. I canceled them after moving out a month ago. I've saved all receipts and communications in case anyone has questions. I hope this clears things up. That was it. No emotions. Just facts. And that comment? It exploded. Within hours, people started liking it, replying with things like, "Didn't know that, good for you," and even "Sounds like someone's trying to guilt trip their kid." A few neighbors messaged me privately, thanking me for standing up for myself. One even said, "This explains a lot. I always thought something was off." It was a small victory, but it felt huge. Because for once, Edgar couldn't control the narrative. And then came the part one hadn't planned, but couldn't ignore. I got a message from someone named Casey. She worked at the same body shop where Edgar and Nolan did side jobs. We'd met once or twice, but barely spoke. Her message read, "Hey, I don't want to stir the pot, but Nolan's been telling people at the shop that you're trying to ruin the family on purpose and that you stole money from Dad before leaving. He says you were always jealous because Dad trusted him more. Just thought you should know." That's when I knew this wasn't just Edgar's campaign. Nolan was in on it too. I remembered how he used to stand by the door and listen when I got scolded. He'd never jump in, never defend me. Sometimes I'd even catch him smiling to himself afterward, like he'd just watched a movie with a satisfying ending. Growing up, Nolan would accidentally take credit for things I did, like cleaning the kitchen or organizing the garage, and Edgar would reward him for it. I never corrected them. I thought it didn't matter. But now I saw how deep the rot went. This wasn't just about being the favorite. Nolan enjoyed watching me fall. He needed it, the way some people need compliments. It fed him, and I was done feeding him. So I decided to go one step further. I emailed the body shop, not the general inbox, the owner, Mr. Halbert. I kept it short, professional, and included attachments of the messages Nolan had sent me, along with proof that the stolen money claim was false. I didn't demand anything. I simply said, "Hi, Mr. Halbert. I'm reaching out regarding some comments made about me by Nolan Edgarson at your business. I've attached evidence refuting his claims, including screenshots and financial records. I'm not asking for action. I just wanted to make sure the truth is on record, as I've learned he's been misrepresenting the situation to coworkers and clients. Best, Amina, Edgar's son." Less than a day later, I got a reply. "Hi, Amina. Thank you for reaching out and for your professionalism. I've reviewed the attachments. Rest assured we take this seriously. I'm sorry you've had to deal with this, and I hope you're doing better now. Halbert." I didn't know what that meant exactly, but a week later, I heard through another source that Nolan had been asked to take a break from the shop. Not fired, just told to stay home for a bit. Apparently, a few clients had asked why someone working at the shop was bad-mouthing his own sister on company time. I didn't celebrate, but I did sleep better that night. And Edgar? He went quiet for a while. No more public posts. No more messages. Just silence. Until yesterday, I got a letter in the mail. Real paper. Handwritten. The envelope had no return address, but the handwriting was unmistakably his. Inside were 2 sheets of notebook paper, folded into quarters. The message was brief. "I don't know why you've turned everyone against us. You've made things harder than they ever needed to be. I hope you find peace. Because none of this is peace." That was it. No apology. No accountability. Just vague guilt-tripping in the form of fake concern. And that's when I knew, really knew, that I could never go back. Not for holidays. Not for birthdays. Not for funerals. He didn't miss me. He missed control. And when he couldn't get that, he tried to poison the well around me. But here's the part he didn't see coming. I still had one card left to play. Something he didn't know I had access to. About 2 years ago, Edgar started struggling with managing the household paperwork. Late notices, misplaced bills, forgotten appointments. It wasn't age. He was only in his mid-50s and sharp as ever when it suited him. It was more that he refused to deal with anything he considered trivial, especially if it didn't involve Nolan. So I stepped in as usual. I took over the mail. I made an online folder for all our utilities, bank statements, and even property tax documents. I kept it organized. Digital backups, email alerts, automatic payments, all under my email, with his permission. After I moved out, I forgot about it. I assumed he'd reset everything or taken it back over. But he didn't. And when I checked the login to the property portal for our town's tax records, I realized 2 things. He hadn't paid property tax in 9 months. The home was still legally under my grandfather's name, Edgar's late father. And that opened a door I hadn't expected. I remembered a conversation with Aunt Marion, maybe 3 years back. She'd mentioned that Grandpa had left the house to both of his children in his will, her and Edgar. But Edgar, being the older sibling and the one living in the house, had pushed her to just sign the papers so things could be simple. According to her, she never actually signed anything because Edgar got impatient and said he'd handle it later. So I called her. "Marion, can I ask you something kind of serious?" She hesitated. "Is this about the house?" "Yes. Did you ever officially sign over your part of Grandpa's estate to Dad?" There was a pause. Then, slowly, "No, I never did. I thought he would follow up with the paperwork, but, well, you know how Edgar is. That gave me everything I needed. Because technically, if the will named both of them as beneficiaries and Marion never signed anything relinquishing her share, she still had legal claim to the house. And with property tax left unpaid, the county had started the early stages of placing a lien on the home. So I told her everything. Not just about the bills, but about the lies, the manipulation, the things Edgar and Nolan had said about me in town. Marion was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You know what? I think it's time I stopped sitting on the sidelines." Within the next 2 weeks, things moved quickly. Marion filed a formal inquiry with the county regarding the deed and estate processing. Since the property had never been properly transferred or updated, it was technically still shared between them. And because the taxes were delinquent, she had legal standing to initiate a petition or force the sale of the house so she could receive her share. Edgar got the notice in the mail and lost his mind. He tried calling me. I didn't answer. He sent texts. I ignored them. Then Marion got a call from Nolan. He was ranting, accusing her of siding with the traitor, me, saying she was tearing the family apart for money. Marion told him calmly, "No, Edgar did that when he pushed everyone away." The next few weeks were chaos for them. Edgar had to hire a lawyer. He tried arguing that the house was his, but the paperwork said otherwise. When the court requested records of utility bills, proof of payment, and documentation of ownership, he had almost nothing. I had everything. I provided copies of all the bills I'd paid and the dates of cancellation. I submitted an affidavit confirming I had covered utilities for over a year without reimbursement. I never asked for anything in return, but seeing Edgar squirm under the weight of facts for once, it was satisfying. Eventually, Marion settled for a buyout, but Edgar didn't have the money, so the court forced the sale of the house. It went on the market 3 months later. The realtor's photos were strange to see. That old front porch where I'd sat reading during summers, the living room where I'd done school projects while Nolan played games, all of it was hollow now. Empty of warmth, stripped of meaning. I didn't buy the house. That would have been a storybook ending, but this isn't one of those stories. A young couple bought it instead. They had a baby on the way and sent Marion a thank you note after the sale. She forwarded it to me. It made me smile. As for Edgar and Nolan, they moved into a 1-bedroom rental on the edge of town. Edgar was bitter and withdrawn, according to the few neighbors who still spoke to him. Nolan never got his job back at the shop. Word had spread, and no one wanted to work with someone who badmouthed his own sister and then got caught lying about it. They tried to reach out a few more times. A birthday card arrived once, and signed, just a single sentence written inside. "Hope you're proud of yourself." I didn't respond, because I am proud of myself. Proud that I walked away. Proud that I didn't let guilt pull me back into a place that thrived on taking. Proud that I held the line when no one else would. These days, I live in a quiet apartment in a better part of town. I have my job, my peace, and friends who don't ask me to prove my worth. I see Marion for lunch every other Sunday. She always insists on paying. And sometimes, just sometimes, I still catch myself thinking about that night in the kitchen. Edgar's voice echoing. "If you're so smart, then pay your own bills." Funny how that worked out. Because I did. And when I stopped paying his, everything he'd built on top of me came crashing down. So yes, I'm proud of myself. Even if they never will be. Especially because they never will be. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.